In Destiny 2, Solo Legend and Master Lost Sectors are the premier activity for farming specific, high stat roll exotic armor. They are relatively accessible, with Legend difficulty being at the power cap every season, which most people can get to given the seasonal artifact and many activities that offer powerful rewards. In Season of the Seraph, there is also the Solo Operative mod, making farming these Lost Sectors easier for those who have been struggling. But there's more to Lost Sector farming than just how fast you can run them. Much of your success is dependent on random number generation, the season's Lost Sector rotation, and a few other pieces of the puzzle that give and take control. First, let's talk about what's in control: your character. What weapons and subclass you use and how well it matches up with the shield and burn type and champion mods for the season do a lot in favor or against you in terms of how fast your Lost Sectors are. Recent news from Bungie on anti-champion abilities and removing match game in Lightfall is promising because up until now, these systems have felt restrictive. In the background, I'm running Lost Sectors on all 3 characters, but Titan is my main. On Perdition, I'm much faster with my Hunter. Grandmaster or Raid builds are not necessarily better either. I did okay in Chamber of Starlight on Shadebinder, averaging about 5 minutes per run, but I've seen this Lost Sector cleared in a minute or less, usually with a Warlock using Icarus Dash and an Eager Edge Sword. As for what you can't control, there's a lot more. So, let's talk about how RNG is like an onion.
Ogres are like onions.
They stink?
Yes. No.
Oh, they make you cry?
No.
Oh, you leave them out in the sun, they get all brown, start sprouting little white hairs.
No. Layers. Onions have layers. Ogres have layers. Onions have layers. You get it.
There are 4 layers to Solo Lost Sector RNG. The first is whether or not you receive an exotic. This is pretty simple. You flip a coin, albeit a weighted coin in this case, and you either get an exotic or you don't. Second is, do you get the exotic you want? This is a growing problem, but we'll get into that later. The third is stat total. This is more important for people really trying to maximize their stats, but it's disappointing to anyone to get an exotic armor piece that you want, only to see that the stat total is below 60. The fourth layer of RNG is stat distribution. Once you have your stat total, they're distributed into 2 buckets. Your first bucket is mobility, resilience, recovery. The second is discipline, intellect, strength. Alright, so you have these 4 layers of RNG. How can you mitigate them? For number 1, you can up the difficulty from Legend to Master. Increasing difficulty may not be worth it though. There's been a lot of data collected on Legend Lost Sector drop rates, and estimates place the Legend drop chance at 24% and the Master drop chance at 36%. I've put some Reddit threads in the description talking about the drop rates if you want to take a look at them. So, at best, Master is about 1.5 times the drop rate of Legend. So, if you clear a Master Lost Sector in twice the amount of time it takes for you to clear a Legend one, over time, you're gonna get fewer exotic drops for the time spent in Lost Sectors than you would just running them on Legend. Not to mention, Master is more stressful. There's more champions, enemies are tougher, and you're probably going to die a lot more, so it's just not as fun. It may be worth it for some people if you can get your Master time down to a point where loading times are your bottleneck. It's certainly possible on Lost Sectors like Aphelios Rest or Chamber of Starlight, but those Lost Sectors aren't always in rotation each season. Your speed is also affected by how familiar you are with the class you're using. If you're running on something that you don't have as much playtime on, which is likely because you're probably doing fewer activities like Nightfalls that give you exotic armor, so Lost Sectors have to be your source, then you're going to take less time, so speedrunning isn't as feasible. When Bungie announced an artifact mod for helping solo players in a December 2022 TWAB, I interpreted it as a mod to mitigate RNG directly. However, all Solo Operative does is help you maybe run Lost Sectors a few seconds faster. Damage isn't normally the issue on Legend difficulty, but it does help with gearing characters you play less. Frankly, it isn't much different than having Breach and Clear or Particle Deconstruction like in previous seasons, other than that we also have Weakened Clear alongside it. Still, these mods are not permanent, and by design have no long-term impact, so they're not reliable for assessing the health of Lost Sectors as a way to acquire gear. For number 2, there's a couple of methods. One is that, fortunately, there's a bit of protection when it comes to exotics, but just as a one-time thing. When there are pieces of exotic armor that you don't have in your collections, each new exotic drop you get is guaranteed to be one of those pieces of armor. So, if you have all the exotics and a new exotic releases, you do a Legend or Master Lost Sector, your first exotic drop from those runs is going to be the new piece of armor. But again, this only helps you if you've never before gotten that piece of exotic armor you want. And that's not to mention, you're still subject to the other layers of RNG. There's also a Postmaster glitch, which has been in the game for a long time, where you fill your engram inventory, then farm Lost Sectors to send the exotic drops as engrams to your Postmaster. You then redeem them on a day where the Lost Sector drops armor in the slot for your desired exotic.
Oh, would you look at that? 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 Alright, can I get some variety at least, guys? Come on now. There we go.
The first source I could find for this glitch was a video by Sneaky Beaver from a Reddit thread a couple years ago. The method was popularized by Fallout Plays in a series on exotic farming. I've linked the thread and an example video from Fallout in the description. This still doesn't help you get the exact exotic you want, it more just shifts your time investment from compacted on one day to potentially spread out across multiple days, which does help some people. But it's not actually going to get you the exotics you want, it's just letting you farm exotics more. And targeting them through a glitch, I doubt that's intentional design. Basically, sending engrams to the Postmaster is just letting you further exploit the law of large numbers, similar to doing Lost Sectors faster. You're getting more pulls at the slot machine, yet again, so you have more chances to get the exotic you want. It's not perfect, but it's something, and it's the best we have right now. Still, it's clunky to fill up your engrams whenever you have the time to farm exotics. You need planning on the front end to make it work, and on the back end to redeem them on the right day. The Postmaster itself has a host of issues, but you can just watch Datto's video about petty things he'd like to see fixed for more. As far as how to get around Layer 3, there's really nothing. I've gotten exotics that range from 68 down to 58, and it sucks when it's that low, but sometimes it just happens. The maximum exotic stat total is supposed to be 71, but that's exceptionally rare. For number 4, there is one way to mitigate it, and that is ghost mods. Ghost mods guarantee a 10 or above in the stat that you want. I've seen anecdotal evidence suggesting ghost mods encourage a stat spike in the opposite bucket from which you're focusing. For example, if I'm using a discipline mod, that encourages a spike in mobility, resilience, or recovery. I don't trust this much because it's anecdotal, and the stats can still be pretty flat while the stat you're focusing still has a 10. Now that we know the factors in play, let's see how they work together. To get the probability of A, getting an exotic, that B is the one that we want with C, the stat total, and D, the stat distribution we want, we can split up the single probability into 4 conditional probabilities. We assume each is independent, so we can just multiply the individual probabilities. B, C, and D are not quite independent, as some pre-Shadowkeep exotics have an automatic +1 to a stat, but we can simplify and say that they are without losing the point. Legend is the difficulty most people will choose, so we'll use that drop rate. As I mentioned before, Legend drop rates are about 1/4. Next, for the exotic armor we want, we can take a look at collections. Over all classes and armor slots, the median drop rate for a given exotic is roughly 1/8, and the average is about 1/9. We'll use 1/8 to give this the best chance possible. For stat total, let's say you're looking for a stat total at 63 or higher, and we assume stat totals are uniform and in the range 58 to 70. Then the probability is going to be 8/13. To make the distribution simple, let's assume that you have a ghost mod on and that there is a spike in one of the 3 stats in the other bucket. Then you have a 1/3 chance of getting the stat distribution that you want. So our rough probability is 1/4 times 1/8 times 8/13 times 1/3 is equal to 1/156. Fuck. But don't worry, it gets worse. Since the launch of Legend and Master Lost Sectors in Beyond Light, each class has received roughly one new exotic per season. For raw numbers, each class had 30 exotics at Beyond Light launch, and 37 as of Season of the Seraph. We got the Ghost Armorer mods in Beyond Light as well, which helps. But for reference, the individual exotic drop rate in Beyond Light was 1/7, which conveniently dropped by 1/8 to 1/8. Inconveniently, it means targeting specific exotics has become more difficult and will continue that trend. So any method to mitigate number 2 gets less effective over time because there are more exotics added every season. With each armor piece, your probability of getting any specific one goes down. Season 19, fortunately, is an exception, so we have at least 2 seasons, 18 and 19, with the same probability for any given exotic, as opposed to diluting the pool more. So why does this matter? Exotics change over time, which on its own is a good thing. Balance changes, new perks, and subclass updates, even small ones, are enough to spark new interest in them. Hunters are the best example here. Liar's Handshake, Lucky Raspberry, and Shinobu's Vow all saw increased use when Arc 3.0 came out. Caliban's Hand was nearly unusable in PvE at launch, now it's one of the best ways to add clear with Hunters. Jafalcon's Hauberk was put in a similar position. The damage bonus alone was hard to justify not using something like Omnioculus in high-level PvE, but having volatile rounds on demand now adds a flat bonus on top of other multipliers, and the synergy with Night Stalker is incredible. Now, exotics aren't always great, and even if they are, you might not care about optimizing for that armor piece. I know many diehard Striker Titans and Voidwalker Warlocks who won't care about Ursa Furiosa or Osmiomancy gloves. It's like a gacha game, where more stuff is added and it becomes harder to get what you want because the pool has become diluted. On top of that, what you are getting in place of what you want may not be that great. Titans are probably the biggest losers over the last 2 seasons, with Second Chance and Point Contact Cannon Brace being basically dead on arrival. Fortunately, seasonal meta and champion offerings change. Lightfall is expanding anti-champ capabilities, which benefits player choice and makes Lost Sectors more accessible. Without match game, you're not as beholden to the shield types in inactivity. Bungie has reinforced their commitment to making build crafting better, and they're definitely following through. Everything from giving players access to all mods to their recent blog post on build crafting shows their commitment. I cannot overstate, though, that I feel exotic farming is missing from this conversation, at least with the state that it's in. Legendary armor farming doesn't have these problems, mainly because of the umbral focusing system that lets you target specific slots, and seasonal offerings having good chances of giving very high stat armor. Due to the layers of RNG and lack of control players have, solo Lost Sectors often do not feel like time well spent compared to other activities in the game. This is only made worse by the fact new exotics are gated behind this activity. The problem is only growing, and I hope Bungie addresses some of these issues in Lightfall. I think there are a number of solutions to this layer cake of problems. For example, you could fold Xur into the existing umbral focusing system, or have exotic umbral engrams drop from Lost Sectors, or some combination of those. I've seen stat rerolling on exotic armor requested by some parts of the community, and I think a system like Glass Needles from D1 could work in the current game economy. Since these activities are aimed at solo players, you could alternatively be more generous with the masterwork materials given. Ascendant shards are not easy to come by for solo players, and I'm sure everyone would welcome the change. In the meantime, I hope this video teaches you something about probability or video games you play, especially if that game is Destiny 2. Thanks for sticking around this long, and I hope you have a wonderful week.